Before we continue with the reviews, I should point out that I am aware of the Zelda history book that has been reportedly released in Japan and is said to include an official timeline, the first time such a thing has ever been released. Obviously, this throws a kink into much of what I've already said and plan to say in the future, especially since what I've read definitely contradicts my own theories. While I have no actual reason to doubt the information, I also can't confirm it so long as the book has no US release. For now, I will continue the reviews using my own theories and will likely bring up the book and its reported timeline in my planned episode dedicated to recapping my own timeline theory. With that out of the way, let's continue. If there's one game that I question being part of the actual Zelda canon more than any other, it would be The Legend of Zelda Four Swords Adventures. I keep viewing the story and plot of this game, and sometimes I just can't make hide nor hair of it. It's like the designers just took almost every character and plot element from the previous games and threw them into a blender to create this story. Oh, but don't get me wrong. It's a really fun game, and for pure gameplay, it might be the one I've enjoyed the most since Link to the Past. The game opens with the traditional Zelda legend of Vati the Wind Sorcerer? Yeah, there's a whole story of how the sorcerer was sealed away by the legendary hero, this time using a sword that split the hero into 4 clones. Where did this come from? Well, I actually need to go back to a small game I skipped over to explain this. The Legend of Zelda Four Swords was an add-on minigame that was included with the Game Boy port of Link to the Past. It required at least 2 people to play with their GBA consoles linked, and in it you have to rescue Zelda from Vati using 4 links that have been split due to the power of Link's sword. So, Four Sword Adventures is a direct sequel to that minigame. This is one of the rare games that officially calls your character Link in the game, and he is also friends with Zelda from the beginning. The game opens with Zelda and the other maidens opening their way to the Chamber of the Four Sword before Dark Link shows up and captures them. Did we leave out any other fan favorites? And you are forced to take the Four Sword, which not only splits you into 4 pieces, but also frees Vati. And thus you now have to travel your way through Hyrule to reach Vati's fortress in the clouds, rescuing the maidens along the way. This is a much different game from the others in that the story is very linear, much more like a platform game. It's divided into 8 stages of 3 areas each, and you have to follow the exact path given to unlock the very next stage. But you can go back and replay stages if you want. The graphics actually take a step backward, but in a good way. The game goes back to the top-down view, and the colors and designs are almost equal to those from Link to the Past, giving it a real nice throwback feel. There was also some way that the game interconnected with a Game Boy Advance console. I'm still not exactly sure how it works. I think it was another one of Nintendo's gimmicks to try and be different from the other consoles, and it didn't work out like they'd hoped. Each area has its own puzzles and missions, but the ultimate objective of each one is clear. You have to break the evil seal at the end of the stage, but to do so, you first have to power up your sword by obtaining Force Gems, which are basically a combination of Triforce pieces and rupees. get 2,000 of them, and the sword gives you the power to blast monsters and break the seal and move on to the next area, where you do it all over again. Yeah, the Force Gems don't carry over from the previous area. You start every one over at 0 and have to find them all again. Same thing with heart containers. You start every area with 4 containers and can find up to 3 more in each area, and then start the next one with 4 again. There's also a ton of the items you've seen from the other games, like the boomerang, bow, bombs, fire rod, and hammer. You can only carry and use one at a time, but unlike Castlevania, you don't permanently lose one item by switching to another. You leave the previous one where you picked up the new one and can come back for it later. You also stock up on Force Fairies that revive you if you die, and I mean you will really stock up on them. I mean, it is virtually impossible to game over in this game because you will acquire tons of these Force Fairies. I truly had more than 60 by the time I reached the final stage. Solving a lot of the puzzles relies on having the right item at the right time, as well as mastering the different formations. There are 4 different attack formations you can place your 4 links in, and you can also split them up and use them one at a time when needed. Every formation is needed at some point in the game, and a lot of them are very useful in battles because they're the only time you can have all 4 links swing their swords at once. So you travel across the different lands of Hyrule, from Lake Hylia to the Lost Woods to the Gerudo Desert, where once again they're in a completely different order from the previous game, and completing one stage reveals the next one on the map. Some areas have boss battles at the end, and some don't, but a lot of the battles are either facing Vati's army of soldiers or different incarnations of Dark Link himself. At the same time, you also meet a lot of other characters from the previous games that do seem like they were just thrown in there, like Kapora Gabora, Megalon and Talon, the Gerudos, and no, not him again! Yes, Tingle is back, and this time they had to know just how much Americans hate him, because he is absolutely nothing more than a nuisance in this game. He shows up on select screens where a big Force Gem appears, and he'll take that gem away unless you can beat him to it, because he's just flat out greedy, while you actually need them to save the world! As you travel the world, you begin to hear hints about the Dark One himself. But once again, it's kind of confusing as to what exactly Ganon is up to, especially since the Triforce is never mentioned in this game. It's supposedly that this is where he gets his trident, but all I can definitely say is that Ganon and Vati are not working together and are essentially rivals. So it would probably be better if you could just lock the two of them in a room together so they can kill each other, but you sadly don't get that option. Once you rescue all the maidens and travel up the Tower of Babel or something to the Palace of the Winds, you confront Vati in a battle that is actually a bit challenging in that he's always floating around, so you have to throw bombs up his tornado and then shoot yourself up in the air for a downward thrust. Of course, once you beat him, you have to escape the collapsing tower in what looks like a reference to Ocarina of Time, and then guess what? You find yourself face to face with Ganon himself. So you, Zelda, and the maidens combine your powers to seal up Ganon again. You know, given how many times he's broken out of your imprisonment, you'd think they'd try some sturdier locks. Four Swords Adventures is kind of an enigma in that it's real fun to play. It puts the challenge more in the puzzles, as the monsters are rarely difficult at all, but it's definitely an anomaly in determining exactly where it would fit in the timeline. There are so many references and shoutouts to virtually every game created previously that it's almost impossible to determine which stories would come chronologically before or after it. This is what led me to suspect that maybe it's not meant to be part of any official chronology, and the designers just created it as kind of a tribute game, paying homage to the series as a whole by mixing up components from the previous games. But that would be a cheat and a cop-out for some people. So if I have to put this officially within the timeline, where does it go? Well, to answer that, I'm actually gonna have to wait until after the next game, which takes the legend of the Wind Sorcerer into further detail.